Hello. I have no idea who is out there. If you guys are just listening in or what. See behind me, I'm starting to get this place organized a little bit into what I want it to look like. I have my, I gotta get it by the way this way. That picture I bought in Curacao. Bermuda. I bought that in Bermuda quite a many years ago. And the big one next to it, I can never figure out which way to go. Woo! That one I had given to me. It is a picture of a dock in Cayman Brac at the end of this condo complex, very small, four units on each side. And I spent many a week there during law school. The woman who had the end unit was a teacher, an art teacher at the high school there on Cayman Brac. And my friend knew I absolutely adored that picture and was able to convince her to sell it to me, or sell it to her, I should say. And it was a Christmas gift. So it is one of my most treasured pieces of art. I actually have pictures, regular pictures. I think I might get one blown up that shows the dock looking out there. Just a beautiful, gorgeous place. If you ever have a chance to go, I definitely recommend going to either Cayman Brac or Little Cayman, which are the smaller of the two of the three Cayman Islands, Grand Cayman being the biggest. Shani. I'm going to assume it's pronounced Shani unless you tell me differently. And Sandy, it's so wonderful to have you guys here. I know that Zena is listening. She is not feeling well today. Something seems to be going around. So Zena, my girlfriend, please rest up. Do not talk today. And I hope you feel better very, very, very soon. Let's see. I do have some housekeeping issues. First, welcome. It's Surviving Together, where we talk about sexual assault and related topics. Now, that little tagline there is going to get changed because I want it to reflect a little bit more about our connection here. I did have one person ask me or say to me, you know, I'd come visit, I'd come see you guys, but I don't want to tell my story. I'm not ready to do that. You don't have to. You don't even have to talk. You can talk to just the other women in here. I think we're 100% women. If there are any men that jump on, please let me know. I think we might have one or two on the replay crew, but not in the live. So I'm going to be changing that so that people truly understand. I shared my story because I thought it was very important if I was going to be hosting a group where we're coming together to talk about different issues relating to sexual assault and general trauma to some degree, that you understand where I'm coming from, what my experiences have been. And I think today we'll really highlight that too, because this is going to be probably a 4-part series now that I'm thinking about it on trauma. It was going to be a 2 and then a 3 and then now it's a 4. And the reason being is trauma affects kids differently than it affects adults. And I'm going to group kids and teens kind of together. We're going to deal with that in a whole separate video. Now, keep in mind that the things we're going to talk about today do affect kids the same way. It's just it affects them to a different degree. And the impact is much more significant and the effects are longer lasting. So I really felt that it was important to address that separately, because when we go to talk about education, understanding how these events affect kids and how much more that they affect them, it's going to help you in terms of if you're there for your child or somebody else's, your family member, being able to be there. And how do you be there? How do you support somebody who's been through that, who's 5, who's 6? It's going to be a lot different than if it's your girlfriend at 20, right? So I'm going to put a whole separate video to that. So today we're just going to start talking just about trauma in general. What is it? what are we talking about when we talk about trauma? The second part that I want to talk about, which will be the next video, is going to be the effects of trauma. How does it affect us mentally? How does it affect us on our body? Okay. Because there's very, very significant things that can happen to us if we're not dealing with our trauma. Yeah, and then also in the second video, I'm going to lump in with that, then the negative coping skills, that if we don't deal with it, how do we end up dealing with it? Okay, all of those negative ways that we deal with things. The third video, I'm going to talk about, well, how do we fix this? How can we heal from trauma, from the effects of long-lasting trauma, or I should say the long-lasting effects of trauma. And we're going to deal with two things. One are positive coping mechanisms, because you're not going to break the cycle overnight. It's going to take a lot of repeat, because what we're going to end up doing is you have to break your subconscious cycle, the subconscious reaction. And that is going to take a lot of work. A lot of us will say, oh, I know what's wrong. I want to change that, right? And I think I addressed this one of our other videos. You want to change it, but all of a sudden you end up reacting the same way and going, what the heck? It's because that trauma is imprinted on our bodies, and it reacts before our conscious brain has a flying chance of saying, whoa, wait a minute, stop. I want to deal with this differently. Okay. So how do we break that cycle? So that's going to be number 3. And then I think number 4 is going to be all about childhood trauma and how is it different? And how do we need to deal with that as a separate thing? Sandy says, so if you're victimized as a childhood, the trauma can stick around for years, at least on some level. Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if no one's realized you've gone through anything. I had childhood trauma, right? I was molested twice as a child. I never told anybody. And I never dealt with that trauma. I didn't think I deserved to. I didn't think I was a victim. That sort of thing stays with you. And even as an adult, please don't downplay this because you don't have a childhood instance. You know, you were only victimized as an adult. You only experienced your SA as an adult. That doesn't matter. It is. We'll start talking about some of the factors that affect us with trauma. And I always have my notes because I don't want to forget anything. First off, is the sound okay for everybody? I've got my mic and I've got my computer going on. So just never a note. Yep. Good. All right. Awesome. Kristen, welcome. Nice to see you. Listening. Okay. Music therapy. Oh, how wonderful. Yes. Wonderful thing to add to our positive coping skills. Music therapy, animal therapy. Wonderful positive coping skills for dealing with trauma. Been very, very effective. So let's talk about trauma in general. What is it? Well, first I want to say what it's not. Trauma is not the event that happens to you. So since we're talking about sexual assault, let's use that. It's not the assault itself. That's not the trauma. The trauma happens when our emotions get so overwhelmed, we can't deal with what is happening to us. Our body realizes we are powerless. We cannot do anything about this situation. So what happens? Our sympathetic nervous system kicks in from the amygdala, which is back here in the back of your brain. That's your animal brain or reptile brain. Some people call it the survival brain. That kicks in with the fight, flight, or freeze reaction. Okay. And how you deal with it just is going to depend on you. It's going to depend on the situation. So the outside stimuli is it can be an event or it can be a series of events. And that's something else we're going to talk about with childhood as well, because a lot of childhood trauma, and I'm going to open it up more to childhood trauma and just not childhood sexual assault, because they really do affect very, very similar. Our brains as a kid, if you're young enough, you don't really understand the sexual assault. How many of us didn't understand it was wrong because of either the age of your perpetrator or the perpetrator was telling you it's not wrong. This is how we love, right? So whether it's a car accident, you lived through an avalanche, or it's a sexual assault when you're 5, the trauma that it imprints on your body is going to be pretty much the same. So there's a couple different types of trauma that we'll be talking about. One they call the big T, and that's when we're talking about that individual sexual assault that is just huge, very significant, right? We're talking full-blown penetration type of thing. Very, very significant trauma with that, or our near-death experiences. Those are those big events that happen that are just, you're almost murdered. Those types of things. Big T. Little T, and big T also, let's say violence and war, which is really why they started even recognize this in the first place, was people coming home from the Vietnam War had PTSD. They didn't quite know how to deal with them, but they knew that they were different. And so that really is how trauma originally got written up in the DSM. It was only recognized in terms of this violence, war, some sort of big event. The little T was not recognized until about 1980, believe it or not. And with little T, we're talking about that pervasive, chronic, insidious type of assaults, types of events that happen to us. So the consistent neglect, maybe just the consistent touching, if we're talking about a sexual assault, just something that's not quite right, but we're not going full on, oh my gosh, this is, a huge event in my life. Your brain isn't anyway, your sympathetic nervous system. So what happens when you have that event and you feel powerless and your body just has no idea what to do, you do one of your F's, your fight, your flight, your freeze. And your sympathetic nervous system that your brain controls on a subconscious level goes, this is danger, and this is how I need to react to it. My dad is yelling at my mom again. I need to get out of here. I need to hide. Or maybe it's your fight response that comes in and you try and get between them. Whatever that response is, you do it consistently, and our bodies automatically respond to similar situations, even as adults. And that's why I want to spend a whole video on childhood, because things that happen to us then can affect our behaviors as an adult, and you don't even realize it. I really had a couple of ta-da moments when I was researching this, realizing how some of the things that happened to me as an adult, I perpetuated on with my child, even though I didn't want to. How do we say, I'm never going to raise my child exactly how I raised my parents? We talk about breaking the cycle, right? Why do a lot of children, mainly males, who are molested as children end up being molesters themselves? You think, well, it can't just be that this whole family is like that, right? No. It's because that's how they learn to deal with things. And so as an adult, that's how they're dealing with things as well. Okay. So we'll touch on that when we get to that other video. The key with the trauma and why it's going to imprint on you is that you cannot do anything about it. You're powerless. You can't successfully fight the danger. Okay. There are some traumas where we know what to do, or we at least have a sense, or we're able to control it into a certain extent. that trauma then turns out not to be as significant for us, or it's not going to imprint as deeply for us because we have some control over it. It's the stuff that we just go, we know it's going to happen and there's nothing I can do about it. So that's the sort of thing we're talking about when we talk about trauma. Dead air. Let me see what else I want to talk about with here. So how can two people go through the exact same situation? If you're talking about, big trauma, two people in a car go through a car wreck, near-death experience, and both of them end up different. You got two friends in a car, say. And let's say you have two sisters who both experience sexual assault within their family, but later on in life, they end up totally different. There are three main factors and then a lot of little factors amongst those. And please, if you guys have any questions or comments that you want to throw up as I'm talking, please do. Otherwise, I'll just kind of chatter on. So I'm trying to keep an eye on the comments as well. So there are three main things. One is our support system. Who is there to catch you when something bad happens, right? You suffer a sexual assault, yet you have a girlfriend or a parent who is incredibly supportive, who gets you the therapy that you need, who deals with it properly, who believes you, okay? These sorts of things, having that sort of positive support system is going to make a huge difference in how deeply that trauma imprints, how quickly we're able to respond or bounce back to normal, right? To our baseline. I cannot stress how much our environment, in terms of our support system, how just deeply critical that is. And if you don't have that at home, or you don't feel like you can share, let's say you are in a situation where you don't get along with your mom, you never have, your sister does. One of you has more support than the other. Now, maybe you both don't tell, but one has a more positive experience with at least one parent than the other one has. Maybe one has a positive experience with dad, one has a positive experience with mom because it's an uncle or a cousin or a grandfather or whoever, somebody who's related in the family, the extended family. Maybe you have a horrible relationship with both. So within your nuclear family, for one, how supportive those people are is going to be your first line of defense, right? Your first critical thing. Then you go outside of that, you can have your extended family, you can have your really good friends, or even sometimes teachers or a trusted neighbor, somebody who really supports you in other ways in your life. The other thing, and the reason why we're doing this separate video, is what developmental stage are you at? Are you a child? Are you a teen? Are you an adult? A child is going to process things much differently than an adult is going to. So the exact same thing happening to a child and happening to an adult, they can come out very differently. One can bounce back easier than the other. And I'm not going to say it's always going to be the adult, because depending on what the trauma is and who perpetrates it, the same for those people. It might be the kid that bounces back, because not having that understanding is actually more helpful. And they can put it aside, they can put it away, and it's easier not to think about it. Now, they're probably going to have to deal with it later on in life, and it will creep out in other ways. But initially, looking at those two people, you're going to say, This adult had a much harder time dealing with this. The third thing that is going to impact how we respond to trauma, how deeply it affects us, is how do we see the world? What is our culture? What is our belief system? What are our values? If you grow up in a place where there is violence all around you, getting beat on, you're kind of like, it's not as big of a deal, right? As sad as that is to say, it's not as big of a deal than the kid who has always grown up in a supportive environment. Dad becomes an alcoholic and all of a sudden is beating his kids and his wife. It's a huge shock, right? What is going on here? That's not something they deal with every day. So how you see your world, your immediate environment, the values that are instilled upon you, the culture that you have, can have a huge impact on the trauma that we, how that trauma affects us. Hi, Izzy, how you doing? We were just talking about trauma, in general. We're going to have I think a 4-part series. We're just talking in general about trauma. Then we're going to talk about the effects of trauma. How do we fix trauma? And I'm going to have a separate video on childhood trauma, because that's totally different. But I do actually want to write down in our positive coping mechanisms about the different types of therapy. Because for some people, there's art therapy, there's music, there's animal, right? Some people dance, right? Movement. So all of those can be very, very positive coping skills. So that is my spiel on generalized trauma and just how it affects us, why it imprints the way it does. Let me speak just a little bit more about our nervous system. It's critical that you understand that this trauma, either a big T trauma or a little t trauma, right? It gets into our brain is dealing with the sympathetic nervous system. I think it's also called autonomous and para-autonomous, something of that nature. They're the same thing. That's run by the subconscious part of our brain. So that's why in dealing with trauma is so difficult, because it's our conscious part of our brain that is dealing with it, right? That's conscious part we're doing the positive coping skills. We're trying to deal with things, while our body, our brain, when it comes to gets one of those triggers, it reacts the same way it did as when the trauma imprinted on us. And it reacts before your conscious brain even has a chance to think. Okay, so that's where the frustrating part comes in. And that is where having positive versus negative coping skills is so, so important, because that is the way that you're going to learn and start to be able to break that cycle of how you react automatically. And it's just going to take repetition and repetition and repetition until your body learns this isn't a deal anymore. When somebody pushes me on a shoulder and I end up against the wall, it's not because I'm going to be assaulted. It's just that's what happened, and I got shoved up against the wall, and screw you. Why did you do that, right? So please give yourself, and that's why I was saying, give yourself some grace when you deal with something and you go, fuck all. That is not how I wanted to deal with it. I said to myself, next time that happens, next time I came home and the living room was just covered with toys, I was not going to yell. I was going to calmly ask everybody to come pick up. And what happens? You're tired. It's the end of the day. You come in, the living room is covered with toys, and immediately that's what happens, right? And it happens before your brain even has a chance to say, let's just be calm with this. So give yourself some grace when you end up responding the exact way you don't want to. This is something that I am learning to deal with still, even though I have accepted and put to bed the actual events, the actual assaults themselves. The trauma lingers on. Dealing with understanding the trauma that I suffered and how it imprinted on me and my reaction to it is a huge step, right? Because you have to realize what is going on with you. And that is why this thing triggers that thing. That's why when I hear a bell go off, that reminds me of the school bell at the end of the day. And I knew I was going to have to stay after, and the teacher is the one who's been assaulting you. So it really all ties, it all ties together that way. So even though we understand, and even though we can put into place positive coping skills, just because we understand what's going on doesn't mean that we're going to be able to, boom, have the trauma go away. And some is more longer lasting than others. And a big part of it, and we'll talk about this, huge part is your age. Plain and simple. It's your age. What do you know at that time? What's your experience level? I think that almost be a better way to say it is because there are some kids who have experienced a whole hell of a lot than others, than some adults. And you wish that would never, ever happen to them. But they have a better frame of reference than somebody who's lived a quite sheltered life. So the effects on them can be vastly different. Getting out of survival mode is so hard. It is. And keep in mind, because it's our subconscious reacting. Our consciousness doesn't have a chance. Even though you say, okay, I'm going to count to 5 so that I can react more positively, or at least not negatively, your subconscious is already doing it. Your subconscious brain's going, whoop, we recognize this danger. We know how to react to this. And it's done before you know it. But we will be talking more about how do you break that cycle. The next video and our next live, so Wednesday night, I want to get into the effects of the trauma on you. Because if you don't recognize that effect is caused by that trauma, it's really difficult to fix, because you're trying to fix a symptom, right? It's the symptom of the trauma. And you have to realize, well, where does that symptom come from? Where am I tracking that back to? And it can be to several places and several traumas. But that's the work that you have to do for yourself. And if you're in professional therapy, they may guide you through that, help you, and if you're not, talking with other people. Even if you're not talking about your own experience, you can talk about symptoms and trauma in general. And you can start making connections in your brain, so you don't have to get into your story. Hi, Stacia. How you doing? I'll kind of go over a little bit about what we've been doing and what we've been talking about. So today we're just kind of opening beginnings of trauma. We're going to be speaking about effects of trauma, both on our emotions, both mentally and physically, because they affect both of them. Definitely believe in that mind-body connection. One definitely can affect the other. Do you have any undiagnosed symptoms that the doctor just can't figure out? Well, it may be related to your trauma. So that's what we're going to talk about on Wednesday. And then next Saturday, we're going to get into our Wednesday. We'll also talk about our negative coping skills, and what we do to avoid, basically. And that's, all of our addictions and just running away, just ignoring it, all of those sorts of things are negative coping skills. So next Saturday, I want to talk about positive coping skills and how do you break the cycle? How do you break that automatic response of your brain and your sympathetic nervous system to an outside stimulus that's coming in, to an event, to a trigger that reminds you of that event? Flashbacks and repressed memories I might deal with together. It's definitely going to be in a separate video, because it's a little different of what we're talking about there, with dealing with actual memories. So hopefully we'll give you guys some skills to at least go away with and start talking with your therapist with, or speaking, with other people. And one of the things that I made clear, Stasia, is I had somebody who approached me and said, I join you guys, but I'm not ready to tell my story yet. That is so okay. You don't have to. I told my story because I felt you guys needed to know where I was coming from, that I know what I'm talking about. I've been there, right? I've been there both as a child and as an adult. And as we were talking, how we deal with trauma, one of the big things that is going to distinguish that is our developmental stage, right? Are we a kid or are we adult? And then childhood trauma, we are going to deal a separate one. So that will be the following Wednesday. So we've got some work in trauma that we're going to do. If anybody has anything else that they want to talk about or to bring up during that time, or they want to break it up, please let me know. My email's working. Yay. I think so anyway. So it is in the description below. It's survivingtogether@gmail.com. So please feel free. You can either comment if you don't mind that other people read it, or just drop me an email. What was the other thing? What I didn't mention to everybody, another housekeeping issue, was in the community tab. That's where I'll post things that just in general that I want you guys to know. And I had said that I'd get a blurb out there that you'd be able to repost to any of your social media. And I did. So it's a little bit different. It's kind of like, hey, friends, help me get the word out type of thing. And I've worded it in such a way, hopefully, that it's not coming from a, hey, I'm a member of this type of thing, and you're having to reveal something of that nature to people you might not want to know. So if you need to change any of that wording to even make it even more vague vis-a-vis you, please do. But I've got our times in there and kind of just a general description of what we do. So please, any social media that you have that you can post it on would be greatly appreciated. I know that Davey helps me in posting it weekly, in the Lifeboat Discord and also on the Lifeboat Facebook page. But if any of you have your own Facebook page, please, if you could, post it, and maybe a month down the road, post it again. If anybody has Instagram, I do not have Instagram. I'm not on Facebook. I'm on YouTube. I have Snapchat, but that's not something you can really post on. And I only have that because my son made me get it, and I think he downloaded it for me. What else is there? There's TikTok. If anybody has a TikTok thing, if anybody wants me to film a 30-second blurb on it to post on TikTok that way, I'm happy to do that. TikTok, I know it's the younger crowd that's doing it. So if you have young adults in your life who would be willing to post it, that would be awesome. I really want to try and get that younger crowd, because the quicker that we get to people who have not dealt with their trauma, who may not have even recognized their trauma yet, the quicker, the more we're going to be able to stop them from getting into extremely negative habits, right? Negative coping skills, the addiction, the cutting, are really bad things that we end up doing. And even just the self-destructive ants, right? Because that mentally, can wear you down quicker than anything. I want to catch those people before they get into addiction. I don't want to have to try and reduce the demand for drugs by getting these people better. I want to catch them before they even need it, before they get there, right? So whether it's word of mouth or whether it's posting on any of your socials, please do, and just help get the word out. Stacia said those ants from trauma is what you believe brought on your addiction. Very, very likely. Very likely. At some point, Tommy Scoville from the Lifeboat is going to be coming over on their channel, and haven't quite decided what we'd talk about. Addiction is an obvious one. But we've got some other ideas we might be bouncing around. So we might talk about addiction for part of it, and that bridge from the trauma to the addiction, right? Where can we nip it so that we don't get there? Where do we have to come in so that we don't use that as a negative coping skill? And if you look at the numbers, it's kind of frightening how young you might have to, right? The number of people who have tried, and I'm not talking just about pot, the number of kids who have tried harder drugs. I know of kids in high school that have, they've gone the cocaine route, they've gone the acid route. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. As you can tell, I did not get into, or the drinking, the drinking is a huge one. That is one of the biggest concerns in my life with my son. His father is an alcoholic. He may be sober right now. I'm hoping, crossing my fingers. He says he is. My son says he sounds different. I can only hope and pray. It would be wonderful, wonderful, wonderful if he is. But his father was an alcoholic, and I do believe his father before him was an alcoholic. So the genetic component of alcoholism is certainly within the family. And I have no doubt that my son carries that gene. Now, does that mean he's going to be an alcoholic if he started drinking? Absolutely not. But it certainly makes it a whole hell of a lot more likely that he would be an addict versus being dependent versus just being able to have one or two and it never being a problem. That's me. Booze has never been a go-to. I've gotten drunk to the point where I threw up twice in my life. I hate it. I get a horrible headache, migraine too, and it's definitely not something that I want to do again. So for me, it's no big deal. For me, weed is my issue. And I'm not addicted, but I'm dependent on it. My body gets dependent on it. If I cut it off, I can't wean. That's impossible for me. But when I cut it off, man, I am an angry bitch for a few days, depending on how much I had been smoking and the frequency of it. Yeah, it's not real pretty. And a mental dependency. I don't know how it is with other addictions because I've never had them. But the mental component of being addicted to weed that's the hardest part for me. I can stop and deal with the physical no problem because I'm dependent on an addict, but that mental is still there, and that's what I'm going to be fighting. And part of it's the ants, and part of it's just I could deal with this easier if I had that, right? Do you ever deal with it easier? I don't, because when I'm on weed, I do absolutely nothing, even though my brain says, oh, just have a little sip, have a little, hit, and then you can do this and this and this. I'm going to be more creative and I'm going to do this, that, and the other. And I don't end up getting off the chair or the couch or wherever I happen to be. Right. Personal question. Do you feel early teens is too early? I've started to notice negative coping skills with my daughter. I'm doing what I can to listen, support, and get her further support. Stasia, are you talking about too early to talk to them about trauma? Absolutely not. To talk to them about ants? Absolutely not. If they're developing those coping skills, if they have that self-talk, it's from something, right? And one of the things we were talking about earlier was big T trauma and little t trauma, right? Little t trauma tends to be the either parental neglect, one of our basic needs aren't met, or our parents are fighting, or physical violence towards you, say from a parent. But we're just talking a hit here and there. We're not talking, getting just totally beat up right every day. But maybe they yank your arm, too hard or something like that. And that sort of thing is continual. Bullying in school. And when you add all these up, individually, they're going to cause some trauma. And that's why now the professionals are saying, nearly all of us have suffered some form of trauma. How we deal with it depends on how deeply it's imprinted on us, our support system, how we look at the world, our experiences. It all combines. So is it too young to start talking to her about these things? Absolutely not. If she's early teens, I'm guessing she's 11, 12, 13, something like that. They are perfectly capable of understanding that what they've witnessed or what they've gone through has made their brain automatically start doing X or Y. And so they need to try and break that cycle, breaking those ants, right? Because you're going to react before you can even consciously, do some other things. So how we react right in that moment after we've realized, oh, I did something, that is going to be, the critical part is getting your stress level down, dealing with it. And, if you yelled, you stopped. And then what did you do? You need to bring your stress level down. And there's several different things that you can do. and we'll be talking about more about this when we talk about how to heal and how to deal with it, because there's a lot of things that I want to go through, and I want to go through them slowly, because it's like you sitting there to have a chance to try it, you know. I just don't want to explain it and then send you off into the world, have you try and deal closer to it. Izzy says, I could have used that video 20 years ago. Self-soothes in a destructive way after SA trauma, and I crawled out of the pit by the skin of my teeth. So grateful to be here. We're grateful you are here as well, Izzy. Yeah, I think that it's never too early to talk to your kids about sexual assault. And we're going to have a video about how do you talk to kids versus how do you talk to teens versus how do you talk to adults. And how you talk to kids, it's going to be different. But if they understand and they know and they can recognize when somebody's grooming them, if they can recognize when somebody's paying a little too much attention to them, they're being a little too much nice, they gave me this gift, that gift, and the other gift. And if they can be able to tell you about that, and if you know, if you're educated as the adult and you can see, whoa, this is grooming. This is the beginning of something bad that could happen. If you can realize that, you can stop that then, right? Because grooming is so insidious because it happens so slowly. And these people are so good at it. And we're going to talk about adult grooming as well, because that happens and you don't realize it. And your boundaries are pushed. And being able to say no, being able to recognize it beforehand and getting out of that dating situation or getting out of that friendship even, you can stop it before anything bad happens. I've really got to learn how to put your comments up. Pin does not. See, these little dots don't do anything. Pins it to the top, but oh, Carol and Stage, I saw you guys were practicing, and Carol actually said it to you. I need to go and look at that video, and I'll be able to get your comments to pull up here on the screen. Right now, all I can do is pin messages, and they pin to the top for a little while. And then I can unpin it. That's all I know how to do. I wish it was just a click and a drag. That would be so much easier. But I will get it, people. I will get it. I'm impressed that I've gotten this far. I am gonna get that stuff up within a week. I swear. It's only been 6 years that I've lived here. Don't judge me. It says, absolutely need education about what consent is. I never heard about it until my mid-20s. Yeah. Because, and what are your boundaries? How do you set boundaries? Because I think for us, I don't want to say especially for women, but it can be easy to, we're people pleasers in general, right? We're those caring, emotional, people. And I think it can be easy to let our boundaries just flex a little bit. And before you realize it, your boundaries are way out where you didn't want them to be. So by being able to say no and keep your boundaries where they are, that is critical. And that can also be a way of stopping grooming. Because if you know this is my boundary here, and somebody's going to try and break through it, little by little by little by little, right? I never know where to look. looking straight at the camera, if I'm just looking at the screen, how it is for you. My others keeper, welcome, welcome, welcome. Shani, I am so pleased for you. So pleased. Trauma for 30 years and you just had a breakthrough a month ago. That's huge, right? It's huge. For us who are older now, just realizing what we went through and realizing how much it has affected us, how much it's affected relationships that we've done, decisions that we've made, relationship decisions that we've done, how we've raised our kids. It's affected every single piece of our lives. You know, my son's graduating high school this year. And so I can still have an impact on him. And hopefully what I have done is had more of a positive impact than a negative impact. But there's certainly things that I would do differently if I had dealt with my trauma. As I said before, I've dealt with the sexual assault. I've made peace with that, but I have not dealt with all of the trauma, because there's a difference between the event that happens and the trauma that is imprinted on you. So keep that in mind, because I think a lot of people, when we speak about the trauma that happened, they think the sexual assault. No, sexual assault was the event. That was the outside stimuli. The trauma is what emotion, what reaction gets imprinted on our nervous system, on that mammalian part of our brain, the amygdala, says, I got to fight this. I got to flight. I got to get out of here. Or I'm freezing. I have no idea what to do. It's I got nothing. Those are going to be your three responses, right? And when something happens again that triggers that system's going to go, danger, danger, danger. I know how we dealt with this before. We get out of here. Or we're just going to freeze, let it, whatever happens, happens. And we're just going to, I'm going to try and be invisible. So really looking at our traumas is critical to being able to deal with them. We need to know where they came from. How in that sexual assault, you could have 2 or 3 traumas that came out of the same event, right? Because at least for me, when I think about, well, if you're sexual assault, if it's something that happens again and again and again, say with a family member or neighbor or something of that nature, depending on where you were or how things were, you may have reacted differently. Let's say it was a date rape situation. You may not think of just that act, just that sexual act as being, the trauma. Maybe there was an instance earlier where he was pushing your boundaries and you were trying to say no, but he kept pushing your boundaries. Okay. You can get trauma from both of those, and it may be different. Maybe as he was on top of you, you were fighting. But maybe earlier when he was pushing your boundaries, you just kind of froze and said, okay, this is what he wants. I'll just do this. And then, then I'll get out of here or whatever. It didn't end up working out that way. But so realizing where our traumas came from and what our reaction is going to allow you to effectively deal with it. So it's a lot of looking internally at ourselves, at stuff that we may not want to look at. But we can't solve a problem unless we find the root of it, right? You have to be able to. And that's really tough. And I won't say it's easiest with a professional therapist, but they certainly know what they're doing. They know where to start and can help guide you through that. But having an excellent support system, having people around you to talk to, whether it's about just about the effects of the trauma or whether it's about the root of the trauma, that's what I want this to be. I want you guys just supporting each other and being there for each other. Maybe eventually we will get something like a Discord server for us, so you can be on that when I'm not having lives. If people want, I will live stream every day if people want. We're just kind of trying it out right now as we're still pretty teeny. I did go down a few subscribers, so check yourself, make sure you're subscribed, but also this happened to me, make sure your subscription has the all button, because I had like 2 or 3 subscriptions. I was still subscribed, but it was on the personalized, so I wasn't getting notifications of when lives were going off. So check that as well, because I know not everybody gets notifications on this, which is why I've been trying in other people's lives to kind of say, hey, remember about this. Only with permission, though. Only with permission. Izzy, a question. Are you going to touch on trauma related to rage? Asking for me, never mind a friend. Yeah, we can talk about that. I don't know specifically. It was something that I had in mind, but Izzy, are you talking about trauma related to rage as in like being in a parental situation or a domestic situation? Some sort of very close interpersonal relationship? Because that's where I know it from. Trauma related to rage. Okay. Let me see if it's in some of my research and that's just not what they're calling it, because it did deal with anger, but I still have some more research that I wanted to do. So absolutely. Izzy says, in regards to the education, you'd go further and teach consent in non-sexual contexts so they know when it happens and they've had a chance being comfortable setting boundaries. Absolutely. 100%. These strategies and the things that help us can help us in everyday life. They can help us with, our regular ants that get into our head because of something else. So certainly the younger you can teach kids, these are my boundaries, the better it is, because they've got interpersonal relationships that they're growing up with, right? And they need to understand where their emotional boundaries are and where their physical boundaries are. And those change, right, as we grow. So the education of your children, of people, I mean, it's a never ending thing. I know my son is a little sick of hearing about drinking and the alcoholism and how it can affect you and how you can become an addict. He's like, Mom, I don't drink. I'm like, yeah, well, that's now. Maybe 2 years from now, and you're not living here, I don't have as great of access to you. I need you to know this. I need you to understand where it comes in the brain. Plant Freak says doing a streaming service like Restream. I did download the app, I think. So I just need to figure out kind of how, if that's something you guys are interested in, if you're interested in having this operate a little bit more like need a meeting in order to talk about your circumstance or talk through a situation, we can certainly do that. Please leave a comment for me. All right. And if enough people are saying, yeah, that's something I'd like to do, I'd certainly be happy to try and get that downloaded. I will tape my son to the chair. That's probably what I will do. No, I need to learn it for myself. I'm not that untech savvy, I guess I should say. Is it as in rage for being victimized? Okay. Yes. In the effects. So that will be our next one. So Wednesday, that will be something that we will be talking about. Yeah, and I've got it under anger. How that imprints to us in terms of the feeling that comes out. I know that I have situations that set me off that I did not realize were related to trauma, were related to a trauma response. Because I would even be saying to my son, I'm like, stop talking to me. You keep talking to me and I'm going to go off. I am just going to, I know it. I can feel it. I can feel it starting to come up inside me. And it's something that I just can't stop. I can go in another room and just kind of let it run its course or try and calm down from there. Now I know some coping skills to try and calm down from there, get that acute stress to go down so you don't pop your top. But if somebody keeps pushing me and keeps pushing me and keeps pushing me and they keep talking, I'm going to explode. And what I say is not going to be nice at all. I have a feeling that might be something similar to what you're talking about, Izzy. How about someone not protecting you from abuse and then acting like nothing happened? Yeah, that's kind of lumped in with neglect. And so we'll talk about that effect and acting like nothing happened. That's really us dealing with a separate issue, because that's dealing with the issue between you and the parent or you and somebody else. And you have to come to a point of acceptance, unfortunately, that this person may never accept responsibility for what they've done. They may never see the damage that they've done. I have somebody in my life like that. And it's not that they won't, it's just that they can't. That's not how their brain works. And they're never going to see it the way I do. And I had to accept that they weren't. So I had to deal with how I reacted inside. What was my feeling? What was that trauma that I was dealing with? It was the same way that I kind of, that I came to peace with the actual sexual assaults, that I came to peace with the perpetrators and not being angry or upset at them. Because one, I'd have to track them down, but two, it wasn't doing me any good. It's kind of like the hate. It takes away your peace. And there is a part of us, of course, wants that person to understand. Look what you did. Look at all these years. You want to hear them say, I'm sorry. And sometimes you're just never going to get it. But we can also deal with that. That definitely can be a whole separate topic of on a day. Sandy Wan says, yes, do that. I think you're talking about getting somebody on. Okay. Yeah, definitely. Please, after this, leave a comment. If that's something that you want to do, leave a comment. I don't know why on my phone I can't get the chat to replay. And sometimes I'm doing my best research when I'm waiting somewhere. Monday, I have to go to court, and I guarantee you I'm going to be waiting hours to do something that will take 5 minutes, unfortunately. It's the first time I've been going to be going to court in quite a while and filling in for a friend. It's been many months. Consent needs to be a part of sex education in school. Oh, absolutely. And I'm shocked that it's not. I want to talk to my son because I know it's not too far ago that he went through this, and I know they talked about STIs now, sexually transmitted infections. How the act happens, right? That's in the second one. I don't know that they get a sex education. I think they do as like a freshman. I'm not sure how it is in Canada, but when they're in about 9th grade, I think they go through a little bit, and they have health class, and I think they talk a little bit about sex education in there. But I think it's like a day, and parents can opt them out. But if consent is not part of that, wow, I'm absolutely shocked. No, that's something that I've been talking to my son since he's been old enough to be interested in girls. Obviously, where I came from, it's super, super important to me. And I actually talked to his girlfriends too. I sat them both down and spoke to them and said, here's the deal. Here's what consent is. Even if you guys have had sex 6 times, you can still say no. You don't have to. Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be taught. Part of what I want to impress when we're talking about, because we will spend several videos just talking about consent, talking about education, I should say, and how do you educate adults? How do you educate children? Because it's going to be different for each of them. How do we teach them? How does an adult teach a child, right? How does an adult learn to recognize what's going on? How do you recognize when somebody has already been assaulted? Because there's cues, right? There's always cues. Our personality changes. Our grades may slip if we're in school. We may not go out as much as we used to. Maybe more withdrawn. We don't take care of our appearance. There's always different things. And if we are aware, maybe we were wrong, and maybe nothing really did happen, and they're dealing with something totally different. It has nothing to do with, a huge trauma or sexual assault or anything like that. Great. But something's still going on with them. And as a parent or as a friend, you want to be able to help. And one of the things I want to impress is, as an adult human in society, as a friend to somebody, I do think it's part of your responsibility to ask your friend what they're going through. Now, they may push you away, and you have to accept that. But trying to help where we can, educating our children, educating fellow parents, educating your fellow friends, I think is our responsibility. So would it be lovely that they taught consent in schools? Absolutely. Absolutely. But each and every one of those parents should be talking about consent too. Now, it would be wonderful if they talked about it in school, because not all parents are going to. Not all parents feel they're comfortable talking about it, or may not even be a thought for them. But I implore each and every parent to talk to their child about it, that it's not the school's responsibility. Because I see that with some parents more and more and more. God, the school didn't teach them that. The school didn't teach them that. Look in the mirror. What are you teaching your child? I think all of us can admit that we could have done a better job. Everybody could. Even if you were a great parent, there's still things you could have improved on, right? This is certainly one of the things that I think that you take and you teach young. You teach boundaries. You teach consent. You teach them about addictions. Because these are all things that they're going to fall into. You know, I've had ad nauseum, as my child would say, talks with him about drugs. I know he's probably experimented with different things. I know he's probably tasted alcohol, and he may have, done some other things. But there's a difference between trying something and getting into it. And there's also now, right, with this whole fence scare, trying something once could be your last decision you ever make. And that is so frightening, so incredibly frightening. So yeah, talking to our kids about all of this is just huge. He says, I got that part down, not carrying hate. It's the rage of being victimized that turns into self-destructive. Love to talk about that if we have a chance. Absolutely. Absolutely. I've written it down, and it'll be one of the things that we will talk about with the effects on Saturday. And if it turns into we need a whole nother, talk about this, whether it's we want to add another date or we want to talk about this on the next live, and we just kind of push our topics forward, that's fine. Believe me, we are not going to run out of topics anytime soon. You should see my bullet point list. It's already 3 pages at this point, because there you can deep dive into everything. A lot of what we're going to be doing, at least my plan, is to kind of do overviews on things at first. But if there are things you want to go into specifically and really looking at them, then absolutely we will do that. 100% in favor of it. So please put in the comment if you want to do a restream where people can pop up on the screen like they do at Need a Meeting. We can certainly make that happen. Shani had to go. Thanks for your chat. Bye-bye. Kristen says sex ed in the U.S. varies from state to state. Now that's interesting. I certainly can see that. Your Bible Belt states definitely may not have as full of an education as you might get in, say, California or New York. I do know in 4th grade they talk about in everywhere that I've been, have been northern states, New York, Iowa, Michigan. They have in 4th grade the kind of what's going on with your own body. So everyone's separated by gender. You get, your body's going to be changing. You're going to be growing boobs. You're going to be arm hair. They go through all of that. Then I think you're right. I think in 7th grade, they go through 6th or 7th grade. They do the what is sex and exploring, looking at the parts of the other person. But I don't think it's a real in-depth, at least I know when I did it, I remember it. And it was just basically, here's what it is. I don't even know that we got an STD at that point, overview. In 9th grade, we had health for 9 weeks. And there was a little bit of sex ed in that. And that was mixed in, but that's it. Sue says, but if I'm not able to recognize it, how do I work on it in the deprogramming of that grooming? Well, you're working backwards, right? So first you're recognizing what is happening to me. What symptom do I have? What am I dealing with? Am I dealing with panic? Am I dealing with anxiousness? Am I dealing with just plain numbness? Um, what am I dealing with here? Then it's a matter of going back and seeing, okay, what was the trauma? How did I get imprinted on this? What in my life could have made me feel like this? And at least for me, and again, I am no professional therapist, but at least for me, excuse me, I need to I had this hooked up. I was listening to music beforehand.
Power off.
At least for me, I have a feeling, at least a gut feeling of where to look. Am I looking at the sexual assault that happened when I was a kid? Am I looking at something that happened because of my dad? Is this something because of bullying at school? So you may not know exactly where, but I would think that you would at least have a little bit of an idea. And if you don't, then it's a matter of going back through those. And who knows, you may discover something else that you need to deal with, right? So you're going to find it eventually. I don't have a better answer than that, but restreaming be good. Okay. I be the thing down. I don't know how to use it quite yet, where I put it on my stream. So I might need to get with Carol about that and do a little test live like you guys did the other day to try and figure out how to do that. I kind of know how to share my screen. I've got some of those things. Yeah, I see my other buttons, but I don't know how to deal. We'll figure it out. I will figure it out. We'll definitely do with that. Lacey, how are you? Hover over a comment. Okay, I'm hovering. I mean, you're highlighted in gray, but you're not showing up on the screen. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm using just straight YouTube. No idea. Click and it should pop out. Yeah, what happens is I do that and I get options of pinning the message, which pins it to the top of the chat, report it, remove it, put the user in timeout, which I think is hilarious. Hide the user or add a moderator. Those are my choices. Unfortunately, that is all my choices that I have. So it may be because I'm using straight YouTube. I don't know. I'm going to go back through your comments just because I think I might have missed some. Sandy says, talking about mental illness and how it relates to trauma. Okay. I have to look at my bullet points. But the effects, under the effects, depression is definitely one of them. So at least that piece of mental illness, we will be specifically speaking about. Mental is the hardest part, separating from the past, from sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, understanding the connection between our brains, the hormones that we release, because really that's what it is, between, the dopamine and cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and adrenaline. Those are the main ones that we're talking about. Being able to actually do something to effectuate a quick decrease in that is just incredible. Drama is trauma for some. Drama was when I was growing up, would be trauma for anyone else not in my family. Yeah, that, again, your environment has a huge impact on how you're going to deal with something. There are kids that have been through war, that have experienced things that it's adults will never experience. So by the time they're 10, they have seen and dealt with so much. Now, they have trauma from that, of course, but subsequent things that happen, the trauma is not as big because then they're done that kind of thing, right? And it's so unfortunate. I come from a yelling family, okay? There was always yelling. Usually it was my parents arguing, or my dad yelling at one of us kids. But yelling was a part of it. You'd yell upstairs at you, right? I remember the first time I was in somebody's house and I yelled for them, and they were in the kitchen. I was in the living room, and they were like, "What are you doing? Shh." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry. What? I had no clue that other people did not yell like that. You went upstairs and got the person. Well, now we can text, right? Or call on the phone. So my son's downstairs, we're calling, we're texting, or whatever. But I didn't realize that wasn't part. So if I'm somewhere and people are yelling at each other, I'm kind of like, yeah, well, that's their thing. It's not bothering me. So yeah, it's what are you used to? You told your daughter in preschool to watch out for age appropriate things. Yeah, we adjusted education as it grew. Absolutely, 100%. And as we talk about education for children and teens, that's something that we're going to speak about. Where are their boundaries versus a teen once they're getting into, and I'm going to go like 12, 13-ish age, when they're getting to the age where they're recognizing boys, their bodies are changing. So it might go 10 and up. And my son, he's 17 now. He's going to be going out in the world. Well, actually, I think he's staying at home for a few more years, but you know what I mean. He hasn't turned 18 yet, but he's going to. And my ability to stop him from doing something is going to be much decreased. Hopefully he'll still listen to his mom, but he's not going to have to ask permission to go somewhere. That's frightening for me. But I have to talk to him about, now that he's going out in the world, where does he set his boundaries? Where are things different now that he doesn't have somebody else who's in part setting them for him? And I think this is a real important piece of education as kids go on, whether it's going off to college or going out into the workforce, if they're moving out. Even if they're not moving out, their freedom is going to change so much that we need to prepare them. I will never forget the day it was the summer between my senior year and going to college in the fall. And we were standing in the garage, and my dad said to me, "Well, you're almost 18 now," because my birthday doesn't happen until later. "I've tried to teach you right from wrong. If you haven't learned it by now, you're not gonna." That was his position on it. I don't agree with him on that. I think that you can definitely learn your entire life. But that's how I was sent off. There was no discussion about, how do you make these decisions on your own now? So beyond sexual assault, beyond the core of what this channel is about, those are things that, I think we talk because most of us are parents, and some of us have already had kids go out into the world and may have some knowledge to give on to others. I think we spoke about all those. Yep. See, I've never been to Quebec. I've only been to Ontario. I would love to go there sometime. Toronto is only about a 5-hour drive for me. At this age, you can suggest but not demand. As moms, we hope that they're decent human beings out in the world. Yeah, we hope and pray as parents at this time that we have prepared them enough, that they can align themselves with the good crowd. Wasn't it Spanx? I don't know if any of you saw on the lifeboat one of the third interview between Spanx and Tommy, and he was speaking about when he really got into drugs. It was because he was with people who that's what they did. So that's what he started doing, right? So it is about the friends that you choose, the people you hang around with. Who do you go with after work now? If you just go out into the workforce and all the guys go to the bar, what do you do? That can be hard because it is just like school. You're trying to fit in, right? So that's can be really important. Something that just clicked into my brain. Carol's been listening since you got home. Just wanted to let you know, love what you're doing here. Thank you. I am going to be getting a hold of you, Carol, because we are talking about doing Restream here. So treating this a little like need a meeting so people can pop in and kind of talk about whatever issue they have going. And also being able to get the comments to show up on the bottom here. It does not work. I hover and I click and there's not an option for me. So I'll probably be contacting you to figure out maybe how to work some of this. One thing that struck me as I was doing some of this research, and that we will talk about when we talk about childhood trauma, and I think that this can be a whole video on its own as well, is because honestly, it was probably maybe a couple of months ago, maybe a little bit long, maybe 6 months ago. I'm 51. I realized that some of my social skills suck. I don't get the social cues that other people do. I don't get some of them. And it's not because I'm on the scale or anything. It has to do with the trauma that I suffered, the type of trauma that I suffered. And you view the world a little bit differently. And what some people might think is joking, you take very differently. Maybe because you've always been criticized, highly criticized at home. That was it for me. True, 100%. Moving, I moved every 3 years as a kid. I went to 2 different kindergartens. So talk about trying to fit in. And how those experiences affect how you grow and your ability to connect with other people, meaning getting those social cues right. I was blown away. I just went, oh my God, that's me. And that explains exactly why I do this, that, or the other. And some people look at me and go, why would you do that? That was kind of rude. And I'm like, what did I do? Because I don't realize it. So that was a big smack in the face for me at 51 to go, I don't know how to interact with people sometimes. So that's a huge thing that I'm going to be working on. And it all goes back to childhood trauma. What did I say said in the beginning? Trauma that you suffer as a child imprints deeper and lasts longer than if it occurs later on in life. It's true. So those things that happened to us as a kid, I really started having to go through and kind of catalog them. And it was all the mental, there really wasn't any physical abuse in my family. That wasn't where we were. My mom was definitely against any of that, and she stopped that. But the mental, it just went on. So it affected my ability to interact with kids as I grew up enormously. And I'm going to show a clip from this video. It's done in a cartoony way, but how the child reacts in these different situations, I went, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. Oh my Lord, you just laid out my childhood. Izzy had a great idea, and I can't get, you went the isolation route, cut your things. I did as well. Yes, I did as well. And you're trying to get back to dancing. I saw you were talking about you've got some dance time coming up, don't you? And I think that's wonderful. As somebody, Kristen was taking her child, who I believe has some mental difficulties, to music therapy. And as that can help kids who are on the spectrum, so can it help just dealing with trauma. There's animal therapy, whether that's having your own animal. I know that when we got some cats, emotional support, in our family. And that helped immensely. So whether it's your own or whether you go out to, some people go out to horse farms or just farms in general and interact with animals, there's a piece there. They don't have all that extra stuff that we deal with, right? You play a game. Is it trauma or ADHD? Actually, I saw a video that was talking about that. So, if there's interest, that's, another topic that we can explore. I'm just going to write it down. I know there's a whole video that talks about trauma versus PTSD, and one's a symptom, and one is what happens is that fight, flight, freeze. What do you do? And then how you're dealing with it. Those symptoms can be PTSD, isolation, all those things. So, but you went trauma and ADHD. Okay. Sure. Now, that's something that I've never had to deal with. So yeah, having Restream and having somebody on here to talk about it. My son was convinced that he was, but he's not. He has a hard time focusing on things he does not like to do, which I think that's most of us. Kristen says, yes, he's 4, and we go for autism-related struggles. Yeah, and you go to music therapy. That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Not anything that I had to deal with that I've had to deal with personally. I've never had any close friends who have had anybody. I take that back. I take that back. But it wasn't somebody who I had a lot of contact with, was much older. My best friend in high school, her older brother, her eldest brother, was already out of the house and in his mid 20s, I think, at that point in time that I knew her when I met her at 13. But he had what's called Fragile X, and it's not very severe mental slowness, but enough to where if you met him, you definitely know something was off, or however you say that. So please, if I use any words when it comes to autism or Asperger's or any of that, I have not had to deal with any of that. So if I ever use anything that's offensive or that I shouldn't, again, some of my social skills, please call me on it and let me know, educate me. I am, as I said, I'm not a professional. I have not dealt, it's just an area I have not dealt with. More days in the crafting studio. Yeah, any of the arts, any of the arts. Um, my son, whether he realized it or not, found great calmness in molding clay. You know, we got a whole set that was different colors. And by golly, that stuff doesn't dry out. I tell you, it takes a long time because I have some things that he made me a long time ago. And he's, why in God's name do you still have that? I'm going to show you one. And he did this on a lark. I think they had to do something for an art class. Oh, he stuck it with, I think it is just a silly face. Oh, there we go. Just a silly, goofy face. I don't know if you can see, he even made, see, I cannot do this. He made lips for it and everything. Now, if I tried to do that, it would be the saddest looking thing. It would be Picasso, basically, because I am horrible at art. I'm absolutely horrible, but he is wonderful. He can get an idea, and he molded the clay, and he made whatever, and he made hot dogs. He made this hamburger. Oh my God, the little itty bitty seeds on top with yellow. I was amazed. He astounds me on a regular basis, I will say, definitely. My other keeper says you found out in your late 40s that you have ADHD. Yeah, adult ADHD is something that wasn't diagnosed, right, until fairly recently. And I don't know, it could be the last 20 years for all I know, but I know that in the last 10 years is really when I've started hearing about it. The next door neighbor to my parents was diagnosed with that. And she went, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense now in terms of how she housekeeps and how she can't housekeep, basically. You know, she has a lot of difficulty with that because she starts one project and then she moves to another when she moved rooms or something like that. So, yeah, we can definitely talk about trauma and ADHD, and you guys will have to do some more education. Christine says, I freeze many different situations. Yeah. You know, and it can be so foreign of concepts to other people that it's really difficult for them to understand. And that's why I think it's so critical that we have a space like this so that we can talk about this. And as I said, a lot of it's general trauma as well. You don't have to have suffered in a sexual assault. That's the main thing that has drawn us all together. But all of this trauma that comes from different places, we're going to deal with in the same sort of manner. So I love that you guys are bringing out other things. Christine Leone says you had a video chat on Discord while you're working on your craft businesses. All are welcome to come along this week. Oh, that's wonderful. So do you talk about your crafts, Christina? Do you talk about whatever you do? I know Blessed to Crochet does a lot of crocheting work. That's a great face. I know, right? He's like, oh my God, this is so bad. I'm like, I kind of like it. Xena was diagnosed in 1994 at 24. Yeah, it's still considered adult, right? Still considered adult at that point. Lacey says you have trauma and ADHD. You can help. Perfect. I'll do some basic research on it before we ever get into that and kind of get me a little bit up to speed. But then certainly that would be a great one for having Restream and having somebody come on and be able to talk more about it from an experience standpoint. Like I said, that is why I put my story up. One, I'm comfortable enough with it at this point that I'll tell the world I've dealt with it and I've made my peace with all of those pieces. But you guys don't have to, right? You guys don't have to. But eventually you will have to deal with it and look at it yourself. And that can be really scary because the sexual assault or the individual events of assaults, right, that all add up to trauma and different traumas, we have to look at it eventually. You don't have to say it. You don't have to tell another person. But what I would say is you're going to have to look at it. Writing it down can be wonderful in terms of trying to organize your thoughts and say, what did this do to me? What kind of trauma did I suffer as a result of this? And then what were the coping mechanisms? What was the result of that? Because the results of that are the depression, the fearfulness, the hypervigilance or hypo. No, it's not vigilance. It's a different word that they go, but hyper or hypo, meaning, hypervigilance, you're always on edge, you're always really looking around, or hypo, where you're numb, you isolate, that sort of thing. Those are the symptoms of the trauma that imprinted because of the event. So the three separate things that you have to understand and understand how they're connected. I encourage each and every one of you, when you do get to the point that you're looking at your assault, say it out loud, whether it's in a mirror or not. If writing down helps at first, and it's easier to kind of take a peek in at that point by writing it and kind of dealing with it that way, it doesn't feel quite as tangible, quite as real when you're writing it. You can see it and it's there. When it has to come out of your mouth, what happened, you have to feel that. You have to acknowledge it. I'm not going to tell you that saying it over and over again is going to be the way that you're going to heal from it. That helped me. But saying it out loud, at least that one time, means you're recognizing it, you're saying it, you're feeling it, and you're putting it there. So you've said it and it's there. And now you can look at it. Now it's separate from you. Yes, the trauma lives on. Yes, those symptoms live on. But that assault and telling yourself, I'm not guilty. I'm the victim here. The perpetrator is the one who did wrong. By saying those things out loud to that assault that you've recognized that happened and how it happened and what happened is super healing. Saying it out loud makes it real. Again, I'm going to preface, I am not a professional psychologist. I've had no training, but I've gone through this a lot of times. And I know that it works. Maybe it won't work for you. But I know that, Tommy talks about it even with addiction. Talking about it, saying it out loud makes it real. So whether you're saying it out loud to yourself in the mirror or you're just saying it out loud, I encourage you to try and get to that point if you haven't. Even if you feel you've dealt with it and you've put it away and put it in its place, if you've never said it out loud, as you deal with some of your traumas, and as we deal with as you deal more with some of the symptoms, you may find that you have to do that. And that is kind of your last little piece of finalizing an issue. Or maybe not. Yes, Zena, for all of you who don't know, Zena Turner here, she runs a channel, Between the Cracks, which deals with the TTI industry, which is the troubled teen industry. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Zena, but I think that's right. And her experiences within the program, I never even knew about this because this wasn't anything that was within my radar. I had no idea that this industry even existed. I mean, it makes sense. I understand a little bit now, but some of what she's told me, it's just horrifying, absolutely horrifying. And these are the kids that need it the most. And that absolutely breaks my heart. Absolutely breaks my heart. Again, the younger we can get the kids, the stronger we can make our kids, the less likely this is to happen in the future. Because they will know where their boundaries are. They will know how to say no. They understand what consent is and what it's not. It's better to catch it before than after, right? Zena, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. My first experience was at 4 as well. So I feel for you. It's a huge problem. And so if you have not checked out her channel, Between the Cracks, I encourage you to. If you've never heard of the industry, you will learn so much. And I know she's working on a pretty big story about a death that occurred to a child who was brought into one of the industries. And it's heart-wrenching, absolutely heart-wrenching. And I am so sorry that it happened to you. We are a warrior. We are. I said victim earlier because you have to recognize that victim, because in that moment, you are the victim. And so that's what I'm talking about. As you're talking about the sexual assault out loud to yourself, to somebody else, there's the perpetrator and there's you. And you are the victim in it. You didn't do anything to bring it on. You don't deserve the shame. You don't deserve guilt. That's on that person, not you. So at that point in time, you're the victim. You make it past that, you're the survivor. Unfortunately, there are some people who are the victim and that's it for them. And I cry for each and every one of them. But we are all here, so we are survivors, yes, and we are warriors. We are strong, and together, we can deal with this. Together, we can have breakthroughs. Like I told you, my head went on realizing that those traumas were affecting how I learned social skills. Oh my God. That's what happened. Because I've always felt stupid. It's like, why do other people get this and I don't? And as I was a kid, some people, why are they reacting like that? And I definitely would be reacting, totally different if somebody did that to me. People are like, what? It's not a big deal. Whoa. Watching my son, as he didn't have those types of experiences, he didn't have those types of traumas that affected his ability to learn social skills and to navigate his childhood that way. The joking around and the things that he got involved in and the interactions, I'd be like, hey, whoa, wait. Because I'm coming at it from how I would react, right? And I think that's right. And it's not. So I have a lot to learn in that, a lot to learn and a lot to trace with that. My other's keeper, you were 4 too. So many of us at that young age. As I said in my first video, I don't 100% remember my first, but I have snippets in my brain. And I think that was my 4-year-old way of protecting myself. One of the things I heard lately, because it is this whole separate video that we'll be dealing with, is repressed memories and what happens when you start remembering things that you did not remember before. And one of the things that kind of kept coming up was the fact that whether you feel it or not, whether you feel ready to remember that or not, your brain thinks you are. So that crack that is opening, that is allowing that memory through, or that little tickle of something, your brain's telling you, you are strong enough. You can deal with this. You are in a safe enough place where you can deal with this. So you may not feel it, but your brain wouldn't let that out if it didn't feel like harm was going to come to it by doing so. And I think that that's something really powerful to remember, especially as you remember this shit and feel powerless all over again. Because remember, that's how we got the trauma. That is the trauma. We were powerless. We were overwhelmed. We could not do anything about it. And there's fight, flight, or freeze. So if you're dealing with any of this, please, please, please keep in mind, you can make it through this too. You may be working through other ones, and you may not feel like you're ready for anything else, but your brain thinks you are. So come lean on your fellow sisters. And if we ever have some guys in here, I'll change my language with that, but I don't think we do. Zena, that's my wheelhouse, repressed memories. Well, that's where I will have you up on the screen helping to talk about it. I can talk about it from the outside, and you can talk about it from the inside. So, way Christina says, I have memories I would like to not remember about my abuser before. Is there a way to not get these memories? Do the memories come up in kind of a flashback way, or it's just, something will trigger it and you will have the memories? There's a part of me that says the memory is there and it's never going to be gone. We don't have, as far as I know, a way of totally erasing that memory. But what you can do is put it in the file cabinet so far back that you're really not going to access it unless you're looking for it. And I think some people don't realize that how we recall things is through our neural pathways. And if our neural pathways aren't strong enough to something, we're not going to remember it very much. That's why we remember some things from our childhood, but not other things. And your brother or your sister may remember something totally different because it had an impact on them. And such an impact that your neural pathways are still strong because you've been recalling that. So what you want to do is by dealing with the trauma that's related to that memory, and I'm going to assume the memory is some sort of event. When we deal with it, when we can disconnect that trauma from that event, you can put that event away. And it's not forgetting about it, because you can't forget about it completely, but you put it so far back that you're not remembering it on a regular basis. And those neural pathways kind of go, you could probably bring it back if you really had to. So I hope that answers your question a little bit. Help close them off. You don't want any more trauma. Yeah. I believe, again, I've got to preface everything here and say, yet again, I am not a professional psychologist or psychiatrist. But if you can connect what trauma, what symptoms of that trauma are connected to that event, that can help separate it. Because you have to get back to the root of something in order to really effectively deal with the other stuff. And for me, that was once I recognized where my trauma came from, where my symptoms of that trauma came from, that's when I dealt with the event itself, or I think for you, probably the memory itself. And for me, I said it out loud because I'd never told anybody. Before, it kind of slipped out a little bit in my family, but I didn't really talk about it a whole lot. So the first time I just said it out loud. And visualization can be very, very, very powerful. You can't remember math. It would have been more useful to remember, right? Yeah, right? There's definitely certain things I wish I remembered. I didn't get very far in French, but I did take 4 years in high school. I would like to have remembered that. I'm horrible at languages, but I put 4 years of effort into that. I don't know if any of you guys have done guided meditation, which is visualization. Sometimes they use it for pain, for pregnancy, if you're giving birth, trying to meditate, going to sleep. But visualization is very, very powerful. And that's how I found myself dealing with those memories. By saying it out loud, I put it here. And you can almost imagine putting it in a box once you've kind of set it, or file, or whatever it is. And then I was able to visualize putting it away. I'm not dealing with it. Not right away, not that instant. I ended up saying it out loud several times. I'm not saying it's something that's going to happen all at once. But if you can remember the visualization, it does work. It definitely does work. And you can put something far back in that file cabinet so that it's going to take extreme effort to reach it. I have the memories as I can remember being in my room with him putting me to bed. I had it even before I was essayed by the person. I don't see why all this therapy opens stuff up. Can we not pay them to? Yeah, that kind of sucks, doesn't it? We don't get to pick and choose what gets brought up and what we remember that way. I don't know if any of that was helpful for you, Christina, but we're all a work in progress. We all have significant issues, I'm going to guess, that we're dealing with. And sometimes they come out in little ways and sometimes they come out in big ways. It was helpful. Great. Yay. Anything I can do to help. I will always just give you my experiences, what I've seen work for me, what I've seen work for other people. If you have a professional in your life, please bring it up to them. See what they have to say. And take it from there. You can take what I say with a grain of salt then. But please, if you work with a professional, talk to them about any of the stuff that I end up talking with, because if I'm wrong, I need to know that, because certainly something that I don't want to be talking about again. But I do try to do some complete research with a bunch of different people, whether it's psychologists, neuroscientists, a lot of people who work on the brain, as well as in psychiatry. Fascinating, seeing how the body and the brain react together. I haven't gotten everything down yet, but my goal is as we do this, and I may have to go back with some of them, I will put my research below. So if there are videos or books or anything that I've relied on for this, you can go back to those and say this is what it was. So that is a goal of mine. I'm not completely there yet. I'm not completely organized yet. This past week was difficult for me. It was a very difficult some relationships to navigate for me. And I didn't necessarily deal with it in the healthiest ways. So we're all a work in progress, right? All a work in progress. Muscle host memory. Learn that in massage therapy. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, our muscle memory is a huge thing. I will never forget my Taekwondo kicks, even though I haven't actively practiced in quite a long time because of my back. But I will never forget them. I will never forget how to do them perfectly because I did it for so long. So you can think about the trauma reaction as a muscle memory reaction if that works better for you. But it's the same sort of thing. Your neural pathways, your sympathetic nervous system is reacting to an outside stimuli that goes, oh, I know that. I know what to do. And so the subconscious goes, boop, and deals with it. Unfortunately, before your conscious brain has a chance to go, stop. I don't want to do it that way. I said to myself, I promised my therapist that I would count to 5 before I did something, right? Well, unless you break that cycle, unless we can break that automatic response, you don't have a hope. And all you're going to do is frustrate yourself. When I learned that, that was another moment for me. Gosh, I wish I had learned this when I had my kid. Yeah, I wish I learned this beforehand. Neurospicy, I dig that. Neurosparkly, I like them both. Neurospicy is winning. You grow your own hot pepper, so we're going. Oh, absolutely. We are our own group, and we can call things whatever we want. There's a day we were working on each other, and each one brought back one incident. I'm not sure what you're getting at, Lacey. Do you mean on here? Or was this something that you did prior? My picture is starting to go, ugh. Sorry about that, guys. In a class. Okay, that's kind of wondering. Yeah. And there are a lot of different exercises to do and ways to work through trauma. There is a workbook by a gal, and I don't know the name of the workbook. I will have to get that. But there's a lady who does a podcast, but she also has some YouTube videos. I think she does more podcasts than she does videos. But her name is Mel, M-E-L, Robbins is her last name. It's with 2 B's, R-O-B-B-I-N-S. And she is a psychologist, I believe. You'd have to read her things, and she is one of the foremost in her area. But she has a lot of good, and she talks to a lot of people who are in the field about this and about how to break these cycles, or what happens to your body when this is going on. How does it physically manifest? And so all the things that we're going to be talking about, she has talked about in different videos and goes through. And I just think she speaks about it in a very approachable way, in a way that you can understand. And the people that she has on are the same, and they will go through exercises, actually, ones that she's never been through. And these are things that we can do for ourselves, because the more, so if you have exercises that you've dealt with in a class, or in therapy, and you want to bring it to us, please do. That's with the fixing, is some of the things that we're going to be going through. And there's so much out there, because what works for one person may not work for the other, right? Even if it's the exact same sort of trauma. Why? Because of those other factors that we talked about. How we see the world, what we've experienced, our age, when we experienced it, and the support system that we have at the time. All those go into it. So that is my first recommendation. I think somebody in the life, or maybe it was I don't know. It was in one of the other lives that I was listening to, and somebody mentioned a YouTube video by Andrew Huberman, and I second him as somebody to watch. He does a lot of the brain-body connection type of thing, dealing with trauma, and talks about it in a very accessible way. So those two, Mel Robbins and Dr. Andrew Huberman. It's Huberman. And he has a bunch of videos out too. I don't know if he does more podcasts than videos. Gypsy Daisy says, I love Huberman. Yeah, I just came across him last week. And as I started some of the more extensive research that I was doing, wow, yeah, I really found that I liked him. So, you've listened to him too. Say he's good. Okay, well, there you go. We got at least 3 people who are saying it. So if you have any interest in that area, definitely check him out. Okay. Do we feel like we've had a meeting? I'm just kidding. How do you guys feel? Do you feel like we've kind of covered this, trauma in general? Do you understand how trauma works, where it comes from, how it gets imprinted on our body, that there's nothing we can do about getting the trauma? Because the way we get trauma is an event, an outside stimuli that is happening to us that overwhelms us. We cannot deal with it. There is nothing we can do about it. So give yourself grace, especially if you're trying to say, well, I could have dealt with that differently. I could have handled that differently. No, you couldn't. The reason you have that trauma is because you were overwhelmed. You could not do anything. Maybe you would have wanted to do something different if you had known X, Y, or Z, because usually that's the case. You could only have done something if you had some other knowledge, but you didn't. You did not. So you can't expect that person to have reacted differently. You did what you did based on what you knew at the time. And so you have to forgive yourself. If there's self-blame in because of a situation, let this be the permission you need to let go of that. Don't blame yourself for something you could not have changed. Period. Please. And if you do, please look at that. Look at it. Why do you blame yourself? Why? What do you think you could have done differently? Is it even realistic? Did you need different knowledge? You may have had another skill that you could have used, but you could have used that only if your brain knew, oh, this is this type of danger. I should use that skill to deal with it. But your brain didn't. It's your subconsciousness that the trauma imprints on. I hope to God you guys can't see that. I unplugged my laptop. So I don't know, just as that counselor gave me permission to call myself a victim when it was a child-on-child sexual assault situation, I'm giving you permission to let go of the blame, let go of the guilt, let go of the shame, because there's nothing you could have done. I hope that helps. And put all of that emotion where it belongs, on that other person. And for me, saying things out loud really helped me to also verbally shove all of that stuff at them and get it out of me. I was doing that. That's why I was doing a visualization of that as well. And just sloughing it all off of me. So if any of you guys have self-blame, have self-guilt, please look at it and realize It doesn't belong on you. Zena says she wrote a letter to her 4-year-old self and it was an amazing experience. Yeah. What a way to work through something. Telling your 4-year-old self, this is what you knew then. This is what your life was like. This was your world. What could you have done as that 4-year-old to do anything different? To have done anything to deserve blame? You don't. And you can do that with your 6-year-old self and your 14-year-old self and your 33-year-old self. Just my ages. I'm looking for a word and I can't. Exercise. There you go. That's what I'm doing. An exercise that can help you. That might help you deal with stuff. Forgiveness and understanding for our younger selves. That's what I love to carry with me into the future. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Because if you get nothing else out of being here, I hope that it's those types of feelings that you learn to let go. And you're only dealing with the trauma and how do I deal with the effects of the trauma? Because that's really what we're talking about. That bugs us on a daily basis are the effects of the trauma. That's the hardest because it was ingrained in me. Really trying to figure out and continue to put up with unacceptable situations now. Okay. So if feeling guilty, if feeling bad, if internalizing all of that was ingrained in you, which I definitely can see how that would happen with certain types of situations. Write a letter or talk it out loud or write it down, whatever works for you. What is it that was ingrained in you? That I was to blame because I did X or Y or Z, whatever it was. Make sure you identify it. Because you can't talk it out, you can't write it out, you can't get rid of it if you're not sure exactly what you're dealing with, right? So identify what was ingrained. Is it blame? Is it guilt? Is it shame? What am I dealing with? Is it all of it? That's possible too. And try and put that where it belongs, on the other person. I wish I could tell you a different way of dealing with it, but just because for me, speaking it out loud, some people visualize speaking it